Well, let's bring in our Thursday trio of MPs to talk about this and other issues orbiting Parliament Hill. Green Party leader Elizabeth May, NDP MP Robert Chisholm, Conservative Parliamentary Secretary Erin O'Toole. All right, Erin, I guess I'm wondering how you can justify significant changes to the Elections Act based on misusing a report that's talking about that.
No one's misusing the report at all, Don. You know, what's interesting, and I thank Mr. Neufeld for his work. He was the Chief Electoral Officer in BC for 10 years. British Columbia doesn't have vouching. So, you know, it's being held out as our lovely democracy will go to shambles when most provinces don't use vouching now. And Mr. Neufeld acknowledged that. It's part of his report. And what his report really said was there's huge irregularities. In fact, between 42% of serious irregularities and 80% of more administrative in vouching. So 95,000 of the 120,000 he talked about have errors. And so do we want that in our system? And the Supreme Court has said irregularities, whether through fraud or anything else, can be serious if it leads to a change of result. And so we're saying the vast majority show ID. Let's have more forms of ID. There's 39 now. Perhaps we can incorporate in more. There's already provisions made for people living in long-term care homes to have attestations and all these things. Let's make sure that there's more ways to show that you can vote than to use a system that Mr. Neufeld has shown is horribly broken.
Elizabeth May, you were at this committee meeting. What's your reaction to what Mr. Neufeld said and what Erin O'Toole just said?
Well, okay, it was pretty clear from, and we've just heard Mr. Neufeld here, there were errors, but they're not material. You know, if you're missing, if your postal code is wrong, but you're making it possible for people to vote, which is a charter-protected right. The right to vote is a very high value, and the Supreme Court, in the same decision that Erin's just talking about, made it very clear that you have to accept some level of error and some uncertainties about whether everybody who voted had a right to vote in order to make sure that the higher value, that everyone has a right to vote. That's what the Supreme Court said in that decision. And when I look at this, they're taking away vouching. They're not bringing anything better. There's no replacement for vouching. And what Mr. Neufeld said in committee today is that this set of changes in the so-called Fair Elections Act do nothing to improve the integrity of the voting system, but they do create barriers to accessibility and people's right to vote. This set of changes will disenfranchise Canadians who have a right to vote, and that's outrageous.
Robert Chisholm, you know, Pierre Poilievre versus Harry Neufeld. I guess we got to believe one or the other.
Listen, their justification for getting rid of vouching is having an argument with a guy that's been doing this for 33 years, who wrote the report, and they haven't even bothered picking up the phone and calling him, for heaven's sakes. I mean, it's just ridiculous. You know, we get Brad Butt, who made up a story about voter ID cards, and now we get this. The Chief Electoral Officer has completely slammed this. Pierre Poilievre is standing there all by himself, and Erin is going along with this charade of trying to pretend that there's a problem that, you know, they've not been able to find a solution for.
I think the way David Christopherson described it as a smoldering ruin of discredited rhetoric is left over from
or that.
Pierre Poilievre.
The one critical thing to remember, Don, and Elizabeth has quoted it, the Supreme Court has recognized the importance of the vote. It's a charter right. They've also said that there can be reasonable procedural compliance measures like ID, like proving who you are. They've said that's acceptable. What Mr. Neufeld's report shows us is this vouching tool, which shouldn't be used in a modern age when everybody has 20 pieces of ID on them.
Everybody does. You do.
Is open to abuse, non-compliance, and whether it's irregularity or a fraud, it's an antiquated notion that we need to move away from.
But the point is, the Neufeld report clearly said the opposite of what you just said, and it said there is no problem demonstrated with vouching, and his testimony today in the committee couldn't have been clearer. He has heard no rumors or complaints from anybody that there's any problem with vouching. They're getting rid of vouching, they're getting rid of the use of the voter cards, and they're getting rid of Election Canada's ability to educate voters.
You're going to listen to the author of the study. or are you going to listen to somebody's interpretation of it, Don?
The O'Toole report's always a very accurate guide on
I'll
this.
be putting one out for you to read.
I do want to ask you something. I think people who are looking for homes go yeehaw because the Bank of Montreal has reduced 5-year mortgage rates below 3%. Last time Jim Flaherty thought that was bad news, that the housing market would become overheated by people going on a buying spree. This is what the new finance minister, Joe Oliver, had to say earlier today.
The bank made its decision. The chief executive officer of the Bank of Montreal informed me about it. I listened to his explanation, his reasons. I reiterated what I just stated, which is the government is gradually reducing its involvement in the mortgage market.
Well, Robert Chisholm, it doesn't sound like he is going to intervene like Jim Flaherty tried to do. What's your take on that?
I agree with him. Absolutely, that Jim Flaherty was wrong. I mean, let the market do what it does, and they're responding to economic conditions. And through competition, the rates are going to move down, and they're going to move up depending on what's going on in the community. Not appropriate for Jim Flaherty to have intervened, and kudos to Joe Oliver.
Elizabeth May?
Limits on how much people have to have for their initial down payment. I wouldn't worry personally about this, and I don't think the Green Party is worried about seeing reduced interest rates to encourage the housing market. We have to watch it, though. We have to watch very carefully to make sure it doesn't promote a housing bubble, and we certainly don't want people taking on mortgages and having later foreclosures on their homes. I don't think we're there yet.
He didn't say he wouldn't do anything. He said that's a hypothetical and walked away. So I guess that leaves the door open if it looks like this is feeding a bubble.
I think Minister Oliver's background, it makes him perfectly suited for this. This is a very careful balance for government. The housing sector, we want to make sure that there's affordable options for people. The housing and construction segment is a huge part of our economy, but we're also worried about leveraged debt, and so in the last few years, Elizabeth alluded to it, we've set limits on amortization periods, we've taken away government protection on home equity loans associated with housing, so you've got to keep a very careful balance, and I think we're striking that.
Because the point about mortgage rates is the issue. And the government should not be involving itself in that. In terms of personal debt, in terms of interest rates on credit cards, in terms of charges on ATMs and that kind of stuff, those are issues that the government can be involved in if they decide it's appropriate.
Let the market go. A minute ago he said let the market go, but now intervene.
There are ways to do that. We're talking about mortgage rates, and I'm responding very much to what it was that Jim Flaherty did. He was wrong. Joe Oliver is right, and let the market go on this one.
I have another one I'm going to skip over because it would take longer than we have left to explain it all on this procedural trick they used to get Tom Mulcair just before a committee. I want to talk about Megan Leslie, NDP deputy leader, has linked to a speech that's being given by Richard Gage. He's an architect, but he's also an expert on 9/11. He believes there's a conspiracy theory behind this. And I guess I just want to get your thoughts as MPs. Do you let any event go under your name on a website in the name of freedom of speech, or do you have to be selective and make sure that certain topics are forbidden? Aaron O'Toole, first to you.
Well, listen, I think this is a little out of character for Megan. I know Megan, and we've got to be very mindful of there was Canadians that died at 9/11, and if MPs are allowing their website to be used by really fringe groups to advertise events, it's opening a Pandora's box. So hopefully she'll learn from this to sort of say, hey, we want to promote our community and charitable events and things like this, but you should set real limits to make sure that there's not extreme and really upsetting views put out through a local member of parliament. So hopefully she'll learn from this.
Elizabeth May?
Yeah, the same sort of thing. I mean, my MP website is, of course, as all of our websites are as parliamentarians, paid for by the people of Canada. So I try to make sure that anything I'm promoting is, if there's a program for summer jobs for students, I want to make sure people know about that in my writing. If there's a charitable event, but I've never put anything, even whether I'd agree with it or not, if it's a controversial concept, I don't put it on my MP website.
Yeah, Elizabeth, or Robert Chisholm.
Yeah, Elizabeth Chisholm.
Yeah.
Elizabeth Chisholm.
I have a sister named Elizabeth Chisholm.
Brother,
Listen, there's probably no other MP that is more tied into the community than Megan Leslie.
I agree with that.
And you know, I don't know the circumstances around this particular the information that's there. You know, I think better to ask Megan. But I tell you, she's plugged in like nobody I've ever seen before.
So you think you got to be careful, or you can let anything go on under your name in terms of?
Well, no, I mean, I think you know, I'm trying to be as plugged in to my community as Megan is, you know, and I think you have to make sure that it's on your website, it's your information, you know, you're giving it some validity by presenting it, and so I certainly pay attention.
Okay, thank you all. Appreciate coming in.
Thank you.